Hello and welcome to This Life of Mine, the show where our guests pick the places, people, possessions, music and memories that have made them who they are. And you've joined us on an exciting show because my guest today joins us as she celebrates 50 years since she created one of the world's most iconic dresses. I'm talking, of course, about the wrap dress that she designed in her 20s, and then everyone from Michelle Obama to Madonna to Amy Winehouse have been pictured in this dress, making her one of the biggest names in fashion. But there is so much more to her than this dress. She prefers not to think of herself as only a designer, but rather a woman in charge, an entrepreneur who married a prince, hung out with Warhol in Studio 54, and was linked to some of the 1970s hottest men. In every sense, she has lived her life to the fullest, and I'm honoured that she's here today. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Then take us away.
I am Diane von Furstenberg. I welcome you to This Life of Mine.
I've got to say, I've been a fan of yours for such a long time, and I feel like it's only when I started looking into your life and I watched your brilliant documentary. Your life story might be one of the most remarkable we've talked about on this show. And I was wondering, when I was thinking about it, does your life feel remarkable to you? Or does all of everything that you've accomplished and done feel very, very normal?
It's so weird because in order to explain anything about me, I think we have to talk about when I was born, because my birth was by far the most audacious thing I ever did.
Go on, in what sense?
Well, 13 months before I was born, my mother was liberated from concentration camp. She weighed 49 pounds. She just was bones in ashes. She could not move, but she survived. So she was liberated, she was put in a train and sent back to Belgium. She was 22. Her parents could not believe that she was alive, and her mother fed her little bit every 10 minutes like a little bird so that she wouldn't, explode or anything. And within 6 months, she was normal. I mean, she was always very thin and small, but she was normal. And her fiancé came back, and they got married. And the doctor said she absolutely cannot get pregnant for at least 3 years because she will die, and her child will not be normal. And sure enough, less than a year later, I was born, and in a sense, I was not normal. And so this way to have been born like that, my mother used to tell me, God saved me so that I can give you life. By giving you life, you gave me my life back. You are my torch of freedom. So I was born with a torch of freedom in my hands. And it could be a little heavy maybe for a little girl. And so she always pushed me not to be afraid, pushed me to never be a victim. If I was afraid of the dark, she would lock me in a closet. Today she could get arrested for that. But as a result, she made me fearless. But my birth explains everything about my life. It's about honoring life every day, about having no fear. You cannot choose who your parents are. You cannot choose where you're born. And you cannot choose the context around you, conflict, whatever. But what you can choose is how you navigate it your own way, go through the landscape of life.
We're going to stick with your mother, if that's okay, because on the show, we always ask our guests to choose a person, place, possession, piece of music, memory, and a movie. And we're going to start, actually, a good place to start would be your possession, which is easily, by far, one of the most remarkable possessions any guest on the show so far has talked about. Tell us the possession that you've chosen for today.
My mother's notes that she left behind for her parents.
Go on, tell me more about that.
She used to tell me that when she was arrested, she was in a truck between when she was arrested to the prison Then they stayed in a prison until they were 1,000, and then they would go in a cattle train to Auschwitz, right? So 2 trucks. And she used to tell me when she was in the truck, she tore little pieces of cardboard and wrote a note to her parents with a match. And I promise you, I say, oh, sure. I never believed it. I just didn't believe it. Anyway, much later, my mother, the last 10 years of her life, she lived in the Bahamas, in a beautiful house by the beach, by the Pink Beach. And after she died, I lended the house to my cousin. So as a gift, he brought me a shoebox full of photographs that his mother, who was dead also, had left him. And a few weeks later, I went to the house. I found this shoebox. I looked through the pictures. Most of the pictures I knew. And underneath, at the very, very bottom of this shoebox, was a super thin envelope, because it had been like that for, 60 years. And it said, Lily, 1944. And I opened this envelope, and there were the 2 notes that my mother had told me. By the way, I don't think my mother knew that her parents ever got the notes, because at that time, when they came back from the camps, nobody talked about anything. They didn't want to know. Nobody talked about anything. So I'm sure she did not know. And I don't get emotional very quickly, but I got, wow. I mean, I remember, and I walked into the blue sea, because the sea is very, very blue there. And I said, that's it. I am the daughter of a woman who went to camp with a smile.
Well, we have copies of the notes here. So is that okay? Would you read us what the notes said?
I mean, she wrote to me in French, so this was translated. May 12, 1944.
Okay, go on.
My dears, addressed to her parents. I'm thinking a lot about you, and that is what is giving me courage. I love you so much. Please forgive me if sometimes I got you upset. I did not know how important you were to me. I am looking forward to seeing you back very soon. Please take care of yourself and tell Leon was her fiancé, that I love him more than anything and more than ever. I kiss you all. See you soon, Lily. And then 6 days later, on her way to Auschwitz, kisses to all of you, my little mommy and my little daddy. I want to tell you that your little Lily is leaving. Where? She does not know. But God is everywhere, isn't he? So she will never be alone or unhappy. I want both of you to be very courageous, and don't forget that very soon you must be in very good health for my wedding. I count more than ever to have a beautiful wedding ceremony. I am leaving with a smile, I swear to you. I love you very, very much, and soon I will kiss you more than ever, you little Lily. So she said that. Of course, she did not leave with a smile, but that explains everything about how she was. Probably in a weird way explain how she survived. She was a survivor. And since we're talking about that, can I tell you when she arrived? Because that's a big lesson that she gave me. So they were in this cattle train. I mean, no window.
They were 4 days on a cattle train. Yeah. No food, no water, no bathrooms, nothing.
Disgusting. She always said that was the worst souvenir ever. And there was an older woman, I mean, maybe late 30s, 40s, and she spoke a little German. So my mother became very friendly with her, and she said, no matter what, I will never leave that woman. So they arrive after 4 horrible days. They arrive in Auschwitz. They open the cattle train, and they make a big line, and there is a selection. And there's a soldier who says, you go right, you go left, you go right, you go left. Behind the soldier, there's this man all in white who doesn't move. He just looks at him. Turns out that was Josef Mengele, who people call the Angel of Death. When time came to select my mother's friend, the soldiers say, you go right. And my mother doesn't wait to be told where to go. She follows her friend. And the soldier lets her go. The man in white, Joseph Mengele, who hadn't moved the entire time, came down, took my mother, whipped her, and threw her on the other side. And she looked at him with so much hate. She said, I never hated anyone so much. Well, it turns out that he saved her life because the people who were going to the right side were going straight to the gas chamber. And the lesson that she took from that, and that she always told me, is that when something bad happened, you should accept it because it may be the best thing.
When you read the notes, when you found them, obviously you found them after your mother had passed away, did it in any way change your perception of her?
Well, if you have a strong mother, and I know because I'm a strong mother too, you have to keep your distances a little bit. I used to find so irritated that she gave always advice to all my friends, and all my friends thought she was so cool and this and that. And now, I'm 100 times worse than her because you become.
In what way?
Yeah, well, in the sense that I give advice to everyone, and and I'm supposed to be always right. And
what's your number one piece of advice for anyone listening to this?
The most important thing is the relationship you have with yourself, and the most important thing is to be true to yourself, because if you are true to yourself, which is not easy, you are free. Even if you're in jail, if you are true to yourself, somehow you're free. If you're not true to yourself, you could live in a huge mansion and you're not free.
Let's move on to, we've asked you for a movie. I know that you love film. Tell us the movie that you've chosen to talk about on the show today.
All About Eve is, first of all, it's a movie that you could keep on the loop.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
And it's the story of this young girl who is a fan and, and who is waiting for the movie star. And then she becomes... Why do I love that movie? Because in that movie, there is all the emotions of humans' relationship. Love, worship, envy, revenge. I don't know, the speed of the movie, the way one scene goes after another, it's like a string of pearls.
Addison, I've been wanting you to meet Eve for the longest time.
It could only have been your natural timidity that kept you from mentioning it.
You've heard of her great interest in the theater.
We have that in common.
Then you two must have a long talk.
I'm afraid Mr. DeWitt would find me boring before too long.
You won't bore him, honey. You won't even get a chance to talk.
Claudia, come here.
I just love that movie.
What's interesting about the film is Bette Davis, who plays Margot Channing in the film. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's well worth your time. But she's an actress. I think she's around 40. She's worried.
Which at the time was very old.
But she's worried about aging. She's very concerned about her appearance. She was a huge movie star, and she's worried that it's kind of
finished for her.
That it's sort of decaying. I think you have an incredibly healthy attitude towards aging.
All right, first of all, when I was growing up, I hated the condition of a child. I always pretended I was a grown-up.
Right.
I hated the idea of being a child, that other people make decisions for you. I remember when I turned 20, my mother said, how does it feel to be 20? And I looked at her and I said, I've been saying I'm 20 for 5 years, So for the longest time, I kind of almost wanted to make myself older. And I was always the youngest, for the longest time. I had 2 children by the time I was 24. I was super successful by the time I was 27. I was separated at that time. I was really very, very young, very much the youngest person for the longest time. And then at one point you become like everybody else. And now I am by far the oldest person around, wherever I go. And it's actually quite interesting, because you've already made it. Because I was so successful, so young, I thought I would never be 30. And I remember I had my 2 small children, and I said, you must be independent. You must know what to do by yourself, because, I could die. And I always remember where they were sitting, and they looked at me, and they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I don't intend to, but these things happen, For me, I have to say that the presence of death has always accompanied me every single day of my life. And I think it has allowed me to enjoy life more.
I completely agree with you. I think it's only in contemplating your death that means that life means anything.
That's right. I agree completely. So one way of dealing with age is, instead of telling him, how old are you? You said, how long have you lived? 10 years?
Oh, that's interesting.
You've already lived 10 years, and then all of a sudden age becomes pride.
You mentioned then about when you had such success at a young age. You really started to move in very, very interesting circles at a young age. How naturally did that come to you?
Yeah, I remember when I first met Egon, so at university in Geneva, I met this beautiful, good-looking, charming prince.
An actual legitimate prince. A genuine prince.
A genuine prince, half Austrian, half Italian.
Knowing you the little I do, it doesn't feel to me that you would be somebody completely comfortable with being thought of as a princess. Is that right or fair?
Most fairy tale, which I don't like, end up with the girl marrying the prince. In my fairy tale, it started like that. So I didn't really use the name very much. In Italy...
But that's what I mean, you wouldn't use it...
In Italy, they still call me Principessa because whatever. And I remember, because I was a feminist and it was the time of the women's liberation, and I was a big fan of Gloria Steinem, and she invented the word Ms., M.S., and the magazine, and so I gave up being a princess to be Ms.
Your entire thing was this woman in charge. You, 2 children, very, very early 20s. You're in this relationship, marriage with a prince, and yet I can only imagine there's the part of you going, well, no, I have all of this to offer. My relationship shouldn't define me in the way that it can define some people, particularly when there are titles involved.
No, I don't think I would want to be defined by another person. Maybe being the mother of my children. I don't judge. I can only answer for myself, really.
Let's move on to your place. Tell us the place that you've chosen as being particularly special and important in your life.
My place, Cloud Walk Farm.
Why? What is it about that place?
Well, when I was 27, I got separated. And it was very complicated because I had 2 small children, a business, and since I was separated, I also had a boyfriend. It was just a lot of people, so I just thought I need a house in the country. For my 27th birthday, I bought that house called Cloud Walk Farm, and I'm still there.
Can you describe it for us?
Yeah, it's actually a few cottages, and the land is beautiful, and it has a river and trees, and it's very simple. It's very American country, but nature is beautiful, and I love nature. I discovered nature when I was in boarding school in Oxfordshire. I mean, the 2 things that inspire me the most are nature and women.
What are some of your favourite things to do at Cloud Walk Farm?
I go on hikes. I go on walk, and I read, and I swim, whatever. But I'm home, and it's a home for my children. It's home for my friends. I love it. I mean, it's and it's also where I'm going to be buried, hopefully. I built a little place, a little cemetery that is there waiting for me.
You've built it already?
Yeah. But ever since my son was very little, we would go every Saturday for a walk, and they would say, where do you think we should be buried? That was he was looking for beaver dams, and I was looking for a place to be buried.
When we're both talking about contemplating death, I think I'm contemplating you're actively planning for...
Well, I'm older than you.
No, I know. Have you planned... Have you talk about your funeral?
I just want to know that I want to be buried very simply, and I want to become a mushroom as soon as possible.
You have this incredible sense of being independent, which is something we're all very familiar with right now. This is in the 1970s. This level of independence. You've got your own home, your own business. And I was looking around at things that were written around that time, and you were really linked with, I have to say, some incredibly handsome men. Some incredibly handsome men. People, Richard Gere, Warren Beatty, all these gorgeous men in their prime and your prime. How was that? Did you ever feel judged in any way?
I don't know about being judged. I'm sure I am. I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to have a man's life in a woman's body. So if men do certain things, why can't women do? And if I would come to LA and I would go out with one movie star one night and another night, I felt great about it, like anybody would. It was like going hunting. I mean, it's like, that was something I would tell my grandchildren, and I did.
The year after you bought Cloudwalk, your brand finally took off in a huge way. And am I right in thinking this was because you saw Richard Nixon's daughter, Julie, was wearing one of your designs on the television?
First, it was a wrap top with a skirt, and it was very popular. And I do remember on that Julie Eisenhower, Nixon's daughter, defending her father on television, and she was wearing the wrap top with the skirt. And that's when I thought, it should be a dress. But I mean, that's really...
you saw it on TV and were like, that should be a dress.
Mean, it could be an anecdote that I once said, and now it sticks with me forever,
Sure, I understand.
I don't know that moment was absolutely... But yes.
What is it about the wrap dress, do you think,
that is
makes it so successful?
Mystery. That is a mystery. There has not been a dress, ever, that has sold for 50 years. The same one. And it's magical. Why? First, the fabric. It's this great silk jersey. Then the print, which has a nice movement, makes it good. Then a woman gets into it. The fabric is super comfortable, but it's tight. It immediately awakens your body language. And something happens, and therefore a woman feels confident. I remember somebody said, it's the dress that the men like and their mothers don't mind.
Ah, that's okay. Yeah, I see that.
So it's proper enough and sexy enough.
What does it feel like when you're walking down a road, or maybe you're in a cab and you're driving through, I don't know, New York or Paris, and you see a woman walking down the street wearing...
Especially...
What does it feel like?
Especially in 1976, or when it was the height. I would drive from home to office and I would count 25 women in the street, a lot.
And what does that feel like?
It feels fun. It's fun. And the fun part also is the variety of women. Like when I had an exhibition here years ago, and I had put a picture of Amy Winehouse wearing a dress. And next to it, Michelle Obama had chosen that dress for the picture of her Christmas card as a first lady. So the variety of it is what's so nice.
Let's move on to a piece of music. Dan, what's a piece of music or a song that you want to talk about on the show today?
I would talk about one song that a few people gave me.
To that song.
The lyrics really spoke to me.
Astounding.
And they spoke to others because I received, a few of those records.
I feel like you're such an important role in feminism. You know, your whole thing was to be a woman in charge. You're such a part of wanting to lead from the front. And then to choose that song is quite incredible. I hope that there will be a lot of women listening to this for whom you will be an incredible role model. What message or piece of advice would you give to them today?
Enjoy being you. Enjoy being you. The good, the bad, the weak, the thing. Enjoy being you because it's your adventure and your life. And do the best you can. But enjoy being you because no matter what, you're always with yourself.
Let's move on to your next selection. We're going to get to person. You came back and pleaded for it not to be one person, but one group of people, and we have allowed this because we love you. Tell us the person or people that you've chosen for the show today.
Okay, my children. But when I say my children, I mean 2 children and 5 grandchildren. And so the 7 of them are really my children. Now, a lot of them are adults, my children for sure, and I have 3 grandchildren that are adults. So 5 of them are adults and still 2 children. I must say that I am very proud of the people that they are. And so I tease them. I say, I may not have been the best mother, but I'm certainly the most successful one because they turned out great. And of course, my son say, of course, you get the credit again.
Why do you say that? I may not have been the best mother. What makes you want to say that?
Because
tell
I
me.
wasn't always there, because I traveled, because this, because that, and because... How old are your children?
My children are 13, 9, and 6.
Okay. Trust me, they will tell you that you were not there, that you did. Just wait a little. So you're never perfect for your children. But having said that, we speak at least 3 times a day, so we're very close. But like my mother, I have always encouraged and pushed them to be independent, to be their own people. So we all have this thing in common. And it's funny because the most important thing you want for your children is them to be independent. Most important. And then you want them to be a little bit, tiny layer of selfishness so that other people don't take advantage of them. And then underneath that, you want them to be generous and kind.
Well, I was going to ask you, actually, you do have this really wonderful relationship with your children and your grandchildren.
And my husband.
And your husband, who is a joy of a man. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to me and my wife and anybody listening who's raising young boys and girls at the moment?
To be independent, to make their decision. My mother never said, be careful. She said, you're responsible. Make them responsible for themselves, for their decision, for what they do. That is the most important thing, is to make them independent. Then you're a good parent, I think. And of course you give them love. But to go back to being in charge, what I want to say is that in charge was always my goal, but I never thought of what it meant. Then I became in charge. Then I became a big feminist, so I do all these events for International Women's Day, and it's always in charge, is always the big umbrella. And then I thought, what does it really mean to be in charge? And it's not an aggressive statement, I am in charge. What it is a commitment to yourself. It's owning who you are. You own your imperfection, they become your asset. You own your vulnerability, you turn it into strength. And that has to be a daily practice, that you try to be as true to yourself as possible. Own it. At the moment of your height, at the moment of your big success, make sure you don't get delusional and believe your own press release. And when things aren't going your way, remember that, well, that door didn't open, but it's because another one will. But the core of your strength doesn't come from your husband, it comes from yourself. And then once you have that, then you can think of others.
You've got a tremendous level of acceptance.
Oh, really?
I think. You are very accepting of this notion.
Certainly of others.
Well, and of this notion that the obstacle is the path. This is it.
My mother told me that story. That story about Mangalis, she wanted to go there. This horrible man saved her. And yet he was a horrible man.
In your autobiography, you talk about all of your children and grandchildren, but you tell a story about your eldest grandchild, Talita, who's visiting you and your mother in New York. She was very small. Your mother is sadly reaching the end of her life. And you tell this incredible story about something quite extraordinary that happened. Can you share that story with us today?
It was Mother's Day, and Alex, my son, came in, and he had 3 things of flowers. He had one for my mother, one for me, and one he was going to bring to his wife. And he came with this little child, Talita. And Talita made her first steps there. And I remember seeing my very, very, very ill, tiny mother sitting in the chair and looking at this child. And I actually saw energy come out of my mother and going into her.
Go on, in what sense did you see it?
I don't know. White energy in that look. I saw some energy between those 2 people looking at each other. And Talita does look a lot like my mother.
Do you see any other traits of your mother in Talita?
Yes, a lot of it, physically, actually.
Let's move on to your final selection, which is your memory. Tell us the memory that you have chosen for today's show.
Oh, swimming. My husband and I are very lucky because we spend many months a year on our boat and therefore at sea. And I love to swim at large. And I swim very far. This summer, I swam 69 hours, because I count, and it's about 2 hours a day. And I love it because I'm all alone, and I meditate, and it's just me, a tiny little dot, with the immensity of the sea and the sky. And it gives me so much clarity, and I have a ceremony, I have these words that I follow, and it's my total bliss and happiest moment.
What do you mean you have words that you follow?
Well, I have this, 30 years ago I had a cancer, and I met Deepak Chopra, and he gave me these words. They're called sutras. Sutras in Indian is a ribbon, so I don't know exactly what it means, but there are 16 words. And so I've used these words always, and so every word, I think, not always the same thing, and it's about 5 minutes per word, and so by the time I turn around and I ask the little boat, how long has it been? Usually it's been an hour 30, an hour 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
You touched on Barry, your husband, there for a moment. I've always continually looked at yours and Barry's relationship with absolute awe.
Why?
Because you have managed to maintain something which I think is very, very rare, which is an incredible amount of respect and
Respect
friendship.
is the right word.
And friendship.
First of all, he gets 75% of the credit, or maybe 65% of the credit. But there's a lot of respect, and it's complete unconditional. When I met Barry 49 years ago, this month, he was a very shy person. He had really, really never had a real relationship. And he met me, and he opened up. He just, poof, opened up. And I felt so special, because I felt like I was the only woman in the world. And that feeling has stayed, there's no condition. I could do no wrong.
What's the tip to having a union that lasts this long?
Respect. Respect. Respect is everything, and he gets more credit, probably, but I'm good too.
What do you mean he gets more credit? Try to explain that.
I don't know. It's miraculous. I mean, it's very in that house. I came in that house 49 years ago, and he had just moved in. It's funny because he bought this house in LA at the same time I bought Cloud Walk in Connecticut, and we didn't know each other then, and we met him very soon after. So I came, and I was very nervous. But the next day he goes to work, and he was chairman of Paramount, and he was 32 or 33. And so he leaves, and so of course I go and open the drawers, to see what are the secret of this man. But all the furniture was from Paramount Studio. It was all props.
Really, a house full of props?
Yeah, because they had just moved in.
Diane, your possession, your mother's notes that she wrote to her parents, your movie is the 1950 classic All About Eve. Your place is Cloud Walk Farm. Your personal people are your children and grandchildren. Your memory is swimming in the ocean, and your song is Billy Joel's Always a Woman. Thank you so much for sharing this life of yours. I will never ever forget it.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Up next is this.
I'm Mark Duplass, and welcome to This Life of Mine. Our love is deep, and we're very sensitive brothers, but if you need me to kill somebody for you and drag them away in a white van, I will do that. I am here for you with some rope, $350 in cash, and a shovel, if required. I can see myself in my early 20s driving myself so hard, pushing through the depression, pushing through the anxiety. And I look back and I'm just like, oh God, I wish somebody had just put their hand on my shoulder and been like, I think what's happening here is you need to go see someone. When I get into a dinner party, what I do is I'm like a computer.
Yeah.
I assess the rhythm.
Scanning all of it.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out, boop, 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 boop. Here's the assimilation. Here's the version of Mark Duplass who shows up tonight.
In a dinner party, that's me in a cab.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a quick fire round? You got to answer these in less than 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite time of year?
Fall.
Holiday destination?
The Med.
Scent?
The scent I wear.
Which is?
No, it depends on when.
Designer other than yourself?
John Galliano.
Hero?
Leonardo da Vinci.
Best piece of advice you've ever been given?
By my mother, never be a victim.
That's it. We're done. Thank you so much. That was
Thank
so
you.
great.
That was very
That was
good.
marvelous.